Is there a grand design, a conspiracy, a secret behind-the-scenes government, a ruling class of elites who control money and banking, government and industry, education and the media, even medicine, nutrition, and health care? That's a question that's often asked by freedom-seeking Americans, average citizens who wonder where their freedoms have gone. And when one's not afraid to ask questions, there are many more that follow. For example, is there a requirement for every American to file a tax return and pay an income tax? Do I have the right in all cases to a trial by jury? And who has the greatest authority in the court, the jury or the judge? Does a jury have a constitutional right, indeed a responsibility, to set aside a law that it finds to have violated the Constitution? Do banks follow the law when they lend money, or are they not, in fact, taking advantage of gullible borrowers who actually fund their own loans with their signatures? Is free travel a constitutional right based in common law, or does all movement that involves the operation of a motor vehicle require a license by the state? Speaking of licenses, why do we have to have marriage licenses, essentially getting permission from the state to become a family? When children are born to us in a hospital, why does the state require the issuance of a state birth certificate, and what happens to it once it's issued? Are Social Security numbers legally required? What can they be used for, and what can they not be used for? Does a bank, for example, have a right to deny opening an account for us if we refuse to give them one? Is involuntary servitude a thing of the past in the United States? Is it true that the American Civil War was fought to end slavery, and that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments eradicated it forever? Or did those Reconstruction Amendments serve a far more sinister purpose? Last but not least, if this conspiracy of government, bankers, media, and the legal system does in fact exist, how on earth was it put over on the American people? Who did it, and how, and what's their ultimate goal? And what can we do about it? We're about to find out the answers to some of those questions. On the earlier CD about the history of education in North America, we discussed the takeover of the apparatus of education by the government, beginning in Massachusetts in 1840. Education was originally the sole responsibility of each individual family, and if they came together to share those responsibilities in a community school setting, it was for religious purposes, usually under the auspices of a church. But the ruling elites, beginning in Massachusetts, saw government-run education as a means to control the population and to perpetuate their rule. The desire to rule over others has been with mankind since Adam and Eve. When Eve took of the forbidden fruit, God told her that her desire would be to rule over her husband, but that he would rule over her. And then their son Cain killed his brother Abel in a fit of jealousy based on a desire to have what his brother had. We shouldn't be surprised then to find out that human beings are still going to great extremes to rule over and to possess the rightful property of others, even in such civilized societies as our own. We've been trained to believe that the United States Civil War was fought to end slavery, that the noble North had to fight to bring the backwards and rebellious slaveholding South into the modern world where slavery was outlawed and all men were treated as equal. But nothing could be further from the truth. That watershed event in American history was all about money and control, and its ultimate effect was to create a whole new kind of slavery that we're still battling today. Abraham Lincoln never freed a slave. His 1863 Emancipation Proclamation freed not a single slave. It was a political weapon aimed only at the southern states still in rebellion to the Union. Lincoln, in fact, did not favor universal emancipation and free citizenship for the slaves, and he, as an astute lawyer, knew that he had no legal authority to force the states to end slavery. In his 1860 inaugural address, he said, "I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so." And he wrote to Horace Greeley in 1862, "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save the Union." Slavery was not simply a Southern phenomenon. It existed around the world in the 18th and 19th centuries, and its existence in America was assumed in our Constitution, which counted slaves as 3/5 of a free person. It was concern over the numerical advantage in Congress that this 3/5 rule gave to states with large populations of slaves that caused most of the conflict about new Western states being added to the Union as free or slave, more than it was a deep-seated moral opposition to the concept of slavery itself. This was clearly a power struggle that had more to do with politics and money than it did with emancipation. And the proof of that is what happened during the Reconstruction after the war between the states. During that time after the war, the Southern states were forced to ratify 3 new amendments to the Constitution. The 13th Amendment freed the slaves, and the 15th gave them the right to vote. But the 14th Amendment created an entirely new class of citizen, a U.S. citizen subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S. federal government first, and only secondarily also a citizen of the state in which he resided. Always before that, Americans were citizens with a capital C, first of the state with a capital S, in which they lived, and only by extension a citizen of the United States. This was critically important to the Northern bankers and industrialists who controlled the U.S. federal government, in that it legally placed this new class of U.S. citizens under their jurisdiction. So yes, many were freed from involuntary servitude to one master, only to be placed without their knowledge into involuntary servitude to another master. And to ensure the success of their plan, the Northern banker-run government, what Lincoln referred to as the Union that he had to preserve, imposed 12 years of Reconstruction on the South. 12 years in which freed slaves as 14th Amendment citizens were given a new voting privilege, while at the same time those who had supported the most basic American right, the right to throw off a repressive foreign government, whether they had been slaveholders or not, were denied the right to vote and to hold public office. 12 years of Reconstruction then created a racial backlash that, once lifted, kept the South divided racially and ineffective politically for over 100 years. With this so-called Reconstruction, the North accomplished its cunning plan, the bifurcation of the South. All of the concerns of Northern industrialists about losing congressional representation to more traditionally agricultural Southern states, due to a pesky clause in the Constitution that counted slaves as 3/5 of a free person, were over, because those 3/5 persons were now subject citizens of the victorious Northern Union, coached for 12 years to always vote with the Republican North, and now assured by Southern white backlash to continue to vote Republican or not to vote at all. The South would never vote as a bloc, let alone rise again. Thus the plutocratic, banker-controlled North permanently cemented its hold on national power.